Hi, everyone. Welcome. Sorry, we had a little technical delay with getting all of our notes for the show deleted, so we had to go rebuild those. My name is Jordan Bain. This podcast is called Unveiling. My guest tonight is Murielle Tugendhaft. And a little bit about myself. I'm a senior guide, teacher, international Kabbalah instructor, healer, and ritual master and more in the Modern Mystery School lineage. And I've been doing this work since 2005 originally, based out of Boston, Massachusetts. And I met Murielle back in 2015 when she was in Boston. She's now out on the West Coast. And Murielle has done lots of different things with the Mystery School. She's currently a certified teacher, healer, and professional life activation practitioner, as well as a ritual master. And her passion is helping others to have more joy. She does this by assisting people in letting go of whatever no longer serves them and moving them into their true selves, empowering them to live joyful, fulfilling, and prosperous lives. So welcome, Murielle. Is there anything else that you want to share about yourself before we get started?
I'm happy to be here.
Very cool. Thank you for being on. So let's dive in. How did you find the Mystery School work, and what was your life like at that time? Because we're talking about trauma tonight, and there's a lot of things that when we were talking before the show really, blew my mind about stuff that you've been through. So what was your life like at that time back in 2015?
Yeah, great question. So at that point in time, I had been dealing with at that point a year of experiencing PTSD. And I was probably at the lowest point in my life. I had experienced a lot of trauma, which we'll dive into, and I was looking to heal. I was trying different things like therapy, different grounding techniques, and I was struggling, really, really struggling. Again, really low point in my life, and from that place, I then was guided and connected to Nick Panzarella, and I knew that I needed something else. And once I got connected with you and heard about the life activation and empower thyself, I knew that this was something that would be really instrumental in my life, and it was a game changer.
Awesome. What kind of, how would you describe the trauma that you experienced? Like this is all to your comfort in terms of what you're willing to share and talk about on a public YouTube, Facebook podcast and more, right? This is where it goes live, but it goes to other podcast services and stuff like that. So what are you comfortable sharing, or what do you feel is important to share about the trauma that you experienced?
Yeah. So I was in a couple abusive relationships, and they were emotionally abusive and sexually abusive. So I was raped more times than I can count. Like 40 or 50 times is my best estimate.
Wow.
And, I also because of being in an abusive relationship, I was put into a life-threatening situation. So one of my exes after we had broken up, had shown up to my house in the middle of the night. And I had gone outside to kind of diffuse the situation, and things took a turn when I was not willing to have sex with him. And, I saw him, he had his hand around my throat, and I saw him decide basically whether or not he was going to kill me. And so that was really, really terrifying and traumatizing. And I had to use my brain to get myself out of the situation. And luckily I was, but that it took time. After that night, I totally shut down what had happened to me. It wasn't even until a year later where I actually realized what had happened, that I had been abused, that I had been that my life had been in danger. My brain just kind of went off. And then once I realized, had that awakening, then I went into PTSD, where I was not able to function. So for those who don't know, post-traumatic stress disorder, it's like 90% of the time I was in fight or flight. Like it felt like my life was in danger. So it was impossible to like cook. It was impossible to clean. It was really hard to like leave my room because if I went out into the world, then my life could be in danger. And it felt that way.
Right.
If
Absolutely.
I was in like a locked four like walls contained space that I was in danger. And that was even escalated more by at the time being on the same campus as one of my exes, and having the potential to run into him. And so I was missing classes, was real even when I was a straight A student. Beforehand, social life, disappearing, just really seeing like my life crumble to survival mode. So, that was kind of like, severe trauma that I experienced, and what the aftermath of that was looking like.
Yeah. And I mean, that's super intense, and more than a lot of people have gone through. It's like when we don't have basic safety and that's been taken away so many times, how do you know that around the next corner it's not going to get taken away again? From the subconscious mind's perspective. Even from a conscious mind's perspective, it's happened that many times. There's really nothing stopping it from happening again, even consciously, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so different things like that would remind me of what had happened in any way, shape, or form would then send me into that fight or flight. And people don't experience traumas to that level. There's so many.
Most people don't. Yeah.
Most people don't. Most people can have traumas like having a car accident or a bad breakup or having been bullied. But what that trauma says, why it's a trauma from my experience, is that in the future you then react to something unrelated, preparing yourself for a similar outcome. It skews your reaction to keep you in the past and projecting that into the future versus being able to be in the present.
Yeah, it totally. And we dissociate. And, it's not surprising it took you a year to even realize what had happened. We don't just snap out of it like right away. Having a long delay between the experience of something and then actually being able to handle it can be many years for people. Maybe you lose a loved one, like a parent or a spouse or even a child, God forbid. And many people are just in shock for months or years. They don't, that person is gone, or that way of being is gone. If we're talking about, something's taken away, like our sense of safety, or our sense of innocence, or our sense of goodness. And then we have to adjust to a totally new way of life, but making room for a fear that we didn't have before. And that is not a fast process. So in terms of, would you say that those are the main traumas that you went through, were like sexual and abuse traumas?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So what, other than, being like only feeling safe at home within your four walls, what were some of the other, if any, like major impacts in your life? Your grades went down. You weren't able to function socially the way that you wanted to or had been able to before. What was happening with like relationships, people, your sense of yourself?
Well, with relationships, I was very codependent, but I was at least starting to realize that I had to be more aware of who I was having like relationships with. And so I was starting to, cut people out of my life for that reason. And I was also starting this desire to be more independent, although that really wasn't super feasible in the beginning.
What did that look like to you? What do the codependents look like, and what ways were you getting hooked into that? And then what ways were you realizing this isn't working?
Yeah. So very, very different things. Like with friends or relationships. Like I got into another relationship which was not abusive, but it definitely was codependent, and I was really reliant on him and also my friends. Like whenever I would have fears, I would need somebody outside of myself to help ground me and bring me back. I was not really able to do that. You know, I like would have really like just bad insomnia, and that was difficult. So it was helpful to be sleeping near other people, or like walking around campus or studying. Like I needed to have like a study buddy. Like I could not study on my own because
to stay like grounded in reality.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because my stress level was so high that just like the stress of school like sent me into fight or flight because it was already like
Right.
so just that little more, and I couldn't focus without having somebody else there to help me feel safe.
Right. I mean, I think that's pretty low grade considering what you went through, actually, not diminishing it at all. But to be like, well, I got raped 40 or 50 times and then I, needed to have a study buddy. It's like, it's not bad as a coping mechanism. Like you didn't descend into, a 8-year drinking binge and get liver cirrhosis and, go to jail 5 times and that sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm joking, but it's not like there's so many people who their coping mechanisms are so much more damaging than what you're describing, that they really fall into patterns that make it like they're already suffering and then they make their suffering so much worse because they're in so much pain. Yeah. So kudos to you for what you did do for coping. Pretty amazing, just who you are. And we haven't even started talking about the mystery school tools, just how you were coping before. Yeah. Anything else that you want to share about that? Like what life was like living with those traumas?
I think there was also a lot of like guilt that I let that happen to me. There was also, I just felt like a victim of everything. I was a victim of what had happened to me. I was a victim of if somebody were to talk about rape or sexual assault unexpectedly, and then that would send me into a whole windful of fear. I was a victim if anybody violated my boundaries ever so slightly because I needed that safety and that feeling of safety. And, I just felt like that was taken away from me, but that was how I felt. And so I was just like a victim all the time.
It's intense to go through life like that. It's really stressful just to live day to day when you have that going on. Yeah. How would I'm going to switch up some of our questions here. How would you define overall abuse and trauma? Just so, because I think different people have gone through such different experiences that sometimes it can be helpful to put a frame around it.
Yes. So I'm going to start with trauma. So I would define trauma as any sort of event that after that there is a change in your behavior or expecting of what is going to happen based off of that event. So let's say, for example, you get hit by a car, right? That's, but that's a one-time event. Before that, you may have driven, thousands of times, never gotten hit by a car. But then if you get into that car, you might like be way more concerned about getting like hit again. You may be panicked, you may be checking your mirrors a lot more. Or just like if a car is speeding up behind you, you may find yourself tensing up for that. So that change because of the trauma. So I would define trauma a bit about the effects, because somebody can experience something, two people can experience the same thing and it not be traumatic. So that is how I quantify that. And
yeah, definitely.
yeah, and abuse, there are several different forms of abuse, and it really takes different forms. But I would generally categorize it as somebody needing control and also um, not being able to meet their own needs. And so getting somebody else to meet their needs for them, but in a really unhealthy way. So
Yeah.
it takes the form of what they want and need matters above all else against the other person's values, against their like personal safety, against their basic rights. There's a large spectrum, but at the end of the day, I think it's that would be a broad description of it.
Cool. I mean, those make a lot of sense, and I think lots of people can relate to different levels of abuse and different levels of trauma in their lives. What has your healing journey looked like with the mystery school? Like, what have been the things that really have helped you make a shift out of trauma? Because when you're talking about this stuff, I was saying this a couple weeks ago when we were talking about the episode for the first time. It's hard for me to believe that you went through it, not because I don't believe you. Of course I believe you. But because it's so cleared from your energy field relative to the level of crap that you went through, that it's like most people would be like, did she really go through that? Because, she doesn't seem particularly affected now. So I'm really curious about, what has helped you with that? Like how, and what have the steps been for you to get out of that trauma and into where you are now?
Great question. Yeah, so when I first had PTSD, I felt like my brain was not working the same way anymore. So
Right.
it felt like if my neurons, my brain used to go on the left track, now they were going on the right track. And so I knew there was a way to veer it back to the left track from the right track. But things like therapy, things like general grounding techniques were just coping. They weren't actually healing. And it wasn't until life activation and empower thyself that it finally started being able to heal and shift. So it was like the life activation turned on that potential.
Yeah.
And then with the Empower Thyself class and initiation, oh my God, was that a game changer? Like, I felt like so many things that had been stressful were just no longer. Like, I was in alignment. I was able to start doing sanctuary meditations where I was able to connect with my higher self and get clarity onto what happened, what was the trauma, how to heal. And I started to actually move out of the victim mentality because it went from all this stuff happening to me to, okay, what's the actual underlying root? What can I do about it? How can I change? There's so many other techniques in Empower Thyself that you get to manage the energy, raise the energy. So when I had triggers, I would shift my energy to a better place. I had the tools. And that was such a game changer. And actually, because of what I've been through with just life activation, Power Thyself, I then was able to start standing up to one of my abusers, which through the process in my school and various opportunities there. So that was huge. And
that's a really intense process too, if you've gone through that to stand up to your abuser, and not a lot of people end up doing it. A lot of people statistically don't even talk about it.
Yeah, I went through the special examiners process at my school, and I also publicly voiced what had happened to me in order to get more support for other students who went through other similar situations. Sexual assault is just more common than would be ideal, unfortunately, on college campuses. And so there was a lot of other students in my position who were suffering from the trauma, and their school and grades were suffering. So I helped speak out to create different systems to help support people like me.
Yeah.
And
it's almost normal, unfortunately.
I know.
Yeah.
Yep. And circling back, so life activation, empower thyself for game changers, and then Kabbalah also really helped me with transforming myself and going into that empowered state and healing a lot of that underlying trauma.
For sure. Yeah. That's one of the things that we really touched on here is as you heal trauma and you come more back to yourself, you reconnect with who you are. Like what have you found out about yourself, your relationships, like whatever part of your life feels significant to you to talk about? What's been the journey back to yourself through healing trauma? Like how, I'm not sure if this question is too vague here, but let's try for it and we'll see what comes out.
I'll run with it. So for me, one of the biggest shifts was going from looking external to going internal and following like my inner drive. So I actually started to be happy and joyful, and that like following what I want to do, following my purpose, instead of looking externally, which I had done during the abusive relationships, right? Always looking for what they wanted me to do, because otherwise there'd be like severe repercussions for that. But now I'm living from within and moving forward and creating my life as I want it. So I have so much more like love and happiness and joy. And I've actually been able to, really, really heal. So now I'm in a really healthy, interdependent, romantic relationship, which is really incredible, considering where I've come from.
That's amazing. And wasn't just a one-step process either. Like you really started mystery school 6 years ago.
Yes.
And you've been through several different relationships since then, right? But they've all been like different reflections of your healing process. Yeah. What, in terms of relationships, just talking about that, where do you see the biggest healing taking place for you in relationships? What's shifted the most about your relationships?
I think what shifted the most is that for me, it's about being like complete and whole on my own. It's not about looking for somebody to complete me. Of course, there are things that that doesn't mean I have to do everything and be everything, but that needs to be that I love myself, right? I'm able to get my basic needs met. And then from that place of knowing I can take care of myself, knowing I have that foundation of self-love, then I can create something beautiful and interweave my energies with a partner. I can create something so much beautiful and healthy and loving. And it allows for me to be treated like a queen, and for me to have desires and wants met, because I'm not needing to manipulate somebody into meeting like getting love from them or getting them to do what I want, because I know if I want to go do something, I can go do it, but I'd rather do it with somebody. And it's from that place of having those healthy boundaries and foundation in myself that I can actually have a healthy relationship. And I never had that before.
It's a big contrast. I mean, maybe for people who have not had the same level of trauma or who have just been in relatively healthy relationships their whole life, maybe they had like parents who modeled that really well for them or something like that. It can be like, yeah, so what? I mean, doesn't everyone just kind of knows who they are? And everyone just naturally says no when they mean no, and they are in touch with their desires and they put themselves out there. And it's like, yeah, not so much. Not everyone is in that boat. A lot of people aren't in that boat. And when you can make the shift from being in that that wonderful place of, yeah, I know myself and I know what I want and I know what I need and I know how to give it to myself, that's really powerful. If you haven't been there before, knowing that it's possible is huge. A lot of people might not believe it. I mean, I've worked with people who are really, really in a tough place, or maybe they've worked for 20 years to get to like a decent place in their relationships, and they don't think that much more is possible. Everyone's in such a different place with relationships, right? And sometimes relationships don't reflect any other area of your life, like your health or your fitness or your career or your finances or your spirituality. Sometimes relationships are like the biggest challenge point for people. Not always. It depends on a lot of things in their lives, of course. But if you're having challenging relationships, just knowing that you could have way better relationships and that there's actually a pathway to heal that is pretty massive. If you told me that before I found the mystery school, I would have been like, yeah, whatever. I don't believe you. I don't think this is going to help me heal my relationships. I think maybe it will help me heal other things. It's spiritual healing, right? But the change in our relationships when we do this work is I've gone through so many changes in relationships, even changing relationships, like getting divorced over the last year and being with a new partner where there's so much more compatibility. And, my ex-partner is an amazing human being and my current partner is an amazing human being, but the relating, what happens in the relationship is so different because of who we are. And being able to find that and attract that and believe in that and build that takes a lot of healing for most people. That doesn't come naturally to most people, at least in my experience. Maybe the slice of, the thousands of people I've worked with over the last, 15, 16, 17 years since having a professional healing practice, maybe those people are a unique slice of society because they're people who are seeking spiritual healing work, right?
Yeah.
So maybe they're more wounded than most. I don't know. I think they're really amazing people, actually. Most of the people I meet, I'm like, you're an exemplary, incredible human being. And, you might have your issues, and everyone has their issues, but you're actually a very bright light. So I don't know. Trauma, though, is big. Everyone has some kind of trauma. Anyone who would be watching this podcast has some kind of trauma in their life, or 99% maybe, because they're interested. They're seeking out a spiritual healing technique or system to be able to shift or transform something. And if you have nothing to transform, you're not going to spend 45 minutes watching this podcast. Being honest,
yeah.
Why would you? What's your investment at all in that? So let's talk a little bit about independence, masculine, feminine, that sort of thing, because you described to me when we talked a couple of weeks ago what your experience of your own feminine self was like growing up, and then with the trauma, and then how it's shifted. Can you kind of let us in with that process for you? What femininity has been through your healing of your trauma?
Yeah, great question. So, growing up, I was generally pretty feminine, but I was taught that.
I'm going to interrupt. What does that mean?
Yeah. Well,
because there's so much interestingness around this. Let's say interestingness.
Yeah.
What is feminine, right?
It's
Is
true.
it all just subjective? Is it all just whatever you want it to be? What does it mean?
Well, it's so much easier for me to talk about what it means to me today.
Right.
Because now I'm actually clear on it, versus I don't think society is always that clear. And I got a lot of mixed messages growing up. But for me now, being feminine means flowing mostly feminine energy.
Which is what?
Yes, a great question.
Right. You and I have an understanding from different mystery school teachings and archetypes and Kabbalah and, the different understandings of different pantheons of gods and goddesses and mythology and those sorts of things. But a lot of people are very lost in terms of what feminine even means. What is it?
Yeah.
What is feminine?
So generally it's more receptive. It's creating the container. And it moves and transforms energy from the masculine. So it's like that guiding principle. And it's more passive than masculine. It's part of the creation process that is more like kind of like in the background almost. And it's more can be more hidden. Like masculine's more at the forefront, active. It's more that form. If we think about, pregnancy, for example, or the pregnant woman creating that container for the baby to grow, and it takes that input from the male to create that. So it's receiving the energy from the male and then shifting it to create. So all energy needs a container to come into being, and feminine is creating that container. And so in more everyday words, everyday life, it can be like bringing beauty, bringing art, bringing that more creative essence into being. I take so much pleasure into decorating spaces, and that elevates the energy of a place. Or I write poetry, that more creative expression, or just in my person, doing my makeup, doing my hair, expressing that beauty, are some different ways that I like to flow that energy.
Yeah. Very cool. And then how would you define masculine energy?
So masculine energy is the force that meets the desire from the feminine. So they pick up on what is put out there, those and they will take that energy and like produce it. So they're the ones who are more going out into the world, more external, more force, more active. And again, both men and women have both these energies within. So it's not about only men do this, only women do this, but it's more about the energies and those archetypes.
Yeah. And how do you see your understanding of masculine and feminine? What does that do in your life? Like what is the weave of those for you specifically? Like you were saying, both men and women have these qualities, have these energies. Men have masculine and feminine, women have masculine and feminine, different combinations for different people, and when there's no commentary there on gender orientation and sexual orientation, we're talking archetypes of energy. So with whatever your archetypal configuration is, how do you see the interplay and the weave in your life between masculine and feminine? Like you personally? Yeah.
Great question. So I am seeing that my desires are met so much more. So knowing what feminine energy is and creating those containers of desire, like those things that I want and love and enjoy. So I now have like a man who's treating me like a queen. He opens doors for me. He walks on the side of the street to protect me. He always gets all the things I need to make me feel comfortable. But I find
and those are desires that you've wanted to have.
Yeah. And things before some things I don't even need to say. Like I recently have been thinking that I want to see like a favorite artist of mine, and then that week he suggests we go see her and buys tickets, or me wanting more exercise weights, and again not mentioning this, but then him being like, oh, my gym's having a sale of old equipment, like what do you want, anything? And so there's this magical aspect too of me creating these desires internally. But then that's
when someone has a lot of trauma, it's very hard to imagine that kind of life.
It is.
It's very hard to be like, what, a queen? Like really, like a magical flow with your man? Are you shitting me? Pardon my French. Like, and then when we heal, it's like, Well, obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously, like why would that be weird? That's just is how it should be.
Mm-hmm.
That's how life can flow. And magic is often really like that, where we don't, when we're not in a place of being able to flow it because we don't have the level of healing we need to be able to flow it, we can look at other people and be like, that's either, you know, over there, that's fake, that's not real, or that's impossible, or I could never have that, or maybe Murielle has that, or Jordan has that, but I can't do that. And it's like, no, you can do that, actually. It's like these are the tools we use to do that.
Yeah.
But I know if I had heard this podcast even 5 years ago, I'd have been like, I mean, sure, I would like that, but I don't know if I can have that in my life. I mean, I don't mean a man specifically. Generally, I've been with women in my life, but like, you know, the flip side of that, as a man, having a woman who would do a complementary set of feminine things to my whatever, you know, I would have just looked at this podcast and thought it was a little ridiculous, actually, that we're talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
So we're putting it out there, and, you know, maybe half the people watching it are like, no way, I don't believe that. It's okay. I'm here to reflect with those people while we're still, you know, broadcasting, to be like, okay, I hear you, I see you, I feel you, and maybe there's more. Maybe you could get to that place that Murielle's talking about.
Well, comment on that. I was in those abusive relationships, and I was squeezing myself into a little box, compromising all the time. What, my basic needs were not being met. Like
like your emotional needs or physical needs, or
like emotional,
both.
physical, like it was like whatever I wanted or needed just didn't matter. Like if my
I mean, that's abusive.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. When your needs don't matter.
And so, things like for example, like what I would eat or not eat, like I was kosher at the time, but that was not necessarily respected. So sometimes it would be like dairy in my food when I was eating meat, which is not kosher.
Right.
And then it was just kind of laughed off like, oh, it's no big deal. Like, it is what it is. Whereas that was really important to me. But now I'm like, oh, I can ask for my, like, I know my food restrictions. I'm like vegan, pescatarian, have some allergies. I know that it'll all be taken care of. Like my man's on top of that, and
right. He doesn't just not poo-poo it, but he's like, can I cook you a vegan pescatarian meal?
Yeah, he's like, how can I support that? And let me make sure I have everything you need. And what's your favorite brand? Like he went to like 4 different stores once to find my like favorite flavor of like LaCroix. So it's a huge difference, right? I never would have imagined going from that. Like I would have imagined like, okay, maybe I can be provided food that like meets all my needs, but I have to be the one to like really be on that, make sure that that's being provided, but I'm needing to take charge with that, and it might not work out, and that just kind of sucks, but that is what it is. To now I have somebody who knows that's something that's important to me, so he is going out of the way to make sure that I have that because he wants to make me happy.
So how did you manifest that? Because I'm hearing the both the men and women in the room psychically asking, well, how do I get that? Yeah. And how did that come about in your life? Like what did you do, quote unquote, to make that manifestation happen for you?
Yeah.
Because that's pretty amazing. I think most people would like a relationship like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had to really and deeply look at myself and look at how I was contributing to the abusive relationships. Because that was a pattern I was perpetuating, right? I played a part. And it doesn't mean that the abuse was right. It doesn't mean the abuse was okay. It doesn't mean my exes were right, or, it doesn't mean any of that. But it does mean that I played a part. I had those patterns, and I had to be honest with myself. I had to go from letting go of that victim, oh, this happened to me, to, yes, this happened, but what can I do to make sure it doesn't happen again? What can I do in my realm? How am I not being strong with my boundaries when I need to be? How am I not loving myself? I was not loving myself. I was desperately depressed and in need of love. And that was in part why I chose these abusive relationships, because I was so in need of love that
Yeah.
I tolerated the abuse. And
Right. Because I mean, with any of those things you were talking about earlier, those are all red flags that, we see that once. And if we are in a healthy state of mind, we see it once and we're like, did I see that? And then we see it twice and we're like, I don't think so. And we see it the third time, we're like, okay, bye.
Yeah.
Not sticking around for that. That's, and then to go from all those red flags to now having what I would call like green flags.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Look, you went to 4 stores to buy me my favorite brand of sparkling seltzer. That's a green flag in my book. But the work there, you're talking about knowing thyself, and that seems like that would be a lot of work.
Well, it is and it isn't. So, mystery school, the modern mystery school, one of the key teachings is about knowing thyself. And so the most amazing thing about this mystery school is that there's a path. There are classes you can take. There are healings you can take. And the healings, oh my God, they make it so much easier. Like sometimes things that would just cause me so many issues. Like, I've definitely had like a 2-hour session, then certain issues have been like gone, and some of it, most of it wasn't like that. Most of that was working on myself, meditating, using Kabbalah, doing the classes, learning the teachings, and reflecting to know myself, know the not so great parts of myself that need to be worked on, bring it into the light and heal to get to where I am now. And so
it's not just everyone else's fault that you were in abusive relationships. No. Damn it.
Unfortunately.
But all just those bad men out there that were just doing these things. And
yeah, well, I think
or it's your parents fault. That's just bad parenting.
Yeah, it's the parents, it's the men, it's society, it's the system, it's everything except for ourselves.
Yeah, it was probably your Prozac vitamin deficiency.
No, yeah, that too.
Yeah, you didn't have enough Prozac in your system. That will help you know yourself better.
Yeah, I mean, I went on antidepressants for a little while. Those did not help. They did not heal me.
Yeah.
So,
no, it's not a healing. Sometimes it gets you through, but it's not the same thing as a healing.
Yeah, and it's definitely, they were tools in the beginning to get me, functioning more.
Right.
But it did not get me to that healing space the way that the tools in the mystery school actually enabled me to do.
Yeah, sometimes we just have to survive, and then psych meds are great.
Yeah.
But if we really want to go beyond surviving, coping, getting through it, dealing with an issue, functioning, then we're going to need to really go in and heal and look at ourselves. And it's definitely work. It's definitely work. But the reward, at least for me, and it sounds like you're saying the same thing for yourself, the reward of it is so much greater than not doing the work. Because when you don't do the work, it's like, I love the memes from fitness where it's like, the 90-day like do nothing program has guaranteed results. Like, you're gonna look and feel the same or worse after 90 days of sitting on the couch. So we know what's gonna happen there. But you don't know what's gonna happen if you do 90 days of, HIIT training, cardio, like high intensity cardio training. Maybe you'll have a totally different life. Maybe you'll have a totally different body, a totally different mindset if you do that for 90 days. But if we just go through every season of our life and we don't make changes, we don't do something differently, our relationships aren't really going to get better on their own.
No, they're not. And relationships in all aspects, with family, friends, work, they all improved. It was not just romantic relationships. And that wasn't honestly why anything I thought I would get from doing mystery
Right.
school at first. But like you said, it's a spiritual school. You kind of expect spiritual healing or things like that. But the truth of the matter is that spiritual healing conveys and translates into your physical life. Like it's one and the same.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. But we're really at the end of our time here. Is there anything else, like any encouragement you want to give to people who want to heal their trauma as deeply as they possibly can?
Yes.
Any last final words for those peeps?
Yeah. So one thing I really want to convey is that you can heal. Like, I know when I was first in that place, a lot of what is out there is telling you how to cope and how to manage. But the truth is, you can actually heal and not live with that trauma holding you back or, hindering you in any way. Like that is possible.
That's super powerful. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for watching and listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe on YouTube or follow me on Facebook. If you're following it on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else that this is posted, subscribe however you do that on that channel. And we will see you next time. Thank you, Murielle, for being on tonight. Love this conversation. And it's so rich to realize how much we can heal. So I really thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jordan.
Awesome. Take care, everyone. Have a great night.